All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and start for today. The first session is hosted by and chaired by Ben Woods and Chris Bells. I'll turn it over to Ben.
Hello, good morning. You've made it to the final day, the first session of the final day. Hi, good morning. Ben Woods with Chris Spells. And just a little bit about how we're going to do this. We are going to really do our best to do two things. Stay on time, so we allow some Q&A time to breathe at the end. And also, some of us, myself included, need to use the 10 o'clock break to check out of the hotel. So make sure we have the time to do that. But yeah, welcome, and I'll turn it over to Chris.
All right, thanks, Ben. So good morning. So welcome to the supplemental session. So in this session, we want to highlight the evolution of the supplementals, some lessons learned, and considerations for future supplementals. So as Ben said, I'm Chris Spells. So we are based in the Brother Program Office. We lead the supplemental program where I'm the bipartisan infrastructure law lead, and Ben is the supplemental. So I'm going to throw it over to Ben and get the session started.
Let me just get the clicker here. Thank you very much. I like to walk when I talk, but yeah, good morning again. And I do want to mention that here at the conference, some of you are getting a chance to meet him. Wayne McKenzie is our division chief. We could also put maybe John Tenho as the acting WPO director out there. But yeah, so we're within Weather Program Office. That's part of OAR at NOAA headquarters. Well, to quote the singer James Taylor, we've seen fire, we've seen rain, and a whole lot more into these supplementals. But for today, we're just going to kind of focus on the hurricane part. That's of most interest to you. And some here in the audience, I've already been a project manager within a supplemental. Some of you might wonder what it takes to be that. So we'll cover a little bit about that. You might have seen this map, maybe not as crunched as this one, that John Cortines showed earlier in the week, our first day, I think, and 24 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters in 2024. So to start, real quick, for those that don't know, what is a supplemental? Just think of it as kind of outside the normal budgetary process. So it's often very kind of short fused. There isn't the time to do the normal process of notice of funding, notifications of funding, opportunities, and letters of intent. So these get spun up real quick, and it usually is dictated by Congress, so it tells us what to do exactly with that money. But there are emergencies that involve the safety of human life and the protection of property, but that's central, of course, to NOAA's mission. Just a little bit of history. These in the right here are sort of the catalysts for the different supplementals. And most of the ones, now when I say supplemental, I'm not even really covering the full spectrum. Some have to deal with like marine debris cleanup. The ones I'm going to be talking about are the portions that are more in the weather enterprise and accelerating the research and mainly research and operations part of it. But you see, for the first couple of supplementals, they had individual hurricanes listed, and then they got too many, so they just put hurricanes and wildfires made it on the scene in the 2019 FY19 supplemental. And so just to show back, going back maybe 8 years, the different teams. And you might recognize some of the names on this list for the executive oversight. And the program management team, here's where you find myself and Chris, and Wayne as division chief, although he kind of oversees the whole division, so he's not able to be as involved day to day as Mark Vincent was back in 2016. And speaking of Mark, he's retiring in just a few days. So good for him. And then for the support team, you see how these are pretty balanced until you get to the last one, right? So one way to look at that is that Shira, you're doing the work of 9 people. Maybe it's time to ask for a raise. Or another aspect is that some of the earlier supplementals there was a lot more coordination needed with the funding across line offices, and we needed a lot more program support back then. And even Shira is kind of just helping out when she can. She's not part of OAR. But anyway, here are the different supplementals. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on everything that's characteristic of each. This one here, though, BIL, bipartisan infrastructure legislation is a little bit different because even though I'm going to talk about the differences between each one, the first three here that are on this chart anyway are pretty similar. And we kind of could contain that, and we had an easier time overseeing it. DIL got very complex, and Chris kind of leads that, but even that's not, it's just this part of DIL. DIL has a lot of provisions. What is it, Chris, 18? 18 provisions. He's kind of within the third provision of the service delivery aspects. So again, I mentioned that this is, dictated by Congress. So in that it'll say the funds here are going to go for this, this, and that. And it'll also dictate how we have to kind of monitor that, the progress of those funds and research projects. But because each one has been a little bit different, and by the way, IRA was more structured like DIL, which means it was very complex and convoluted. But because they've evolved, we really can't predict just how the next one will be set up. But this is going a little bit closer in on the FY18. Technically, it was the Improving Forecasting and Assimilation, or IFAA. Now you know we call it FY19. It's a lot of letters. But right in here where it talks about the hurricane intensity, you see there the money across the different line offices. And back then, we had a DA as part of it, improvements in weather forecasting, 27 projects, but there were 90-some sub-projects with all these different contracts, awards. The funding on that was very complex and a lot of work for the program team. And so with FY19, it kind of simplified into fewer projects, 11, but they were bigger projects. And the project managers involved here often had larger teams working on it. And then also in 18 and 19 was sort of the introduction and increasing component with the social science. So social science became a part of these FY and FY19 supplementals. And wildfires made it on this, still in the current one, of the 28 projects in DRSA, or sometimes I'll call it FY22, of the 28, 8 now are completed, but they're in the fire, the wildfire, and the floods. We still got a ways to go for hurricanes and extreme precip. Okay, I was here and someone asked me, well, what do you do at WPO? What does the supplemental program team do? And when you put team there, you might just put Chris and my name there. That's what the team is. But we do coordination. Again, I call it cross-line offices. The monitoring of the progress of the projects. The reporting is real big. We just had our PMC, which is the Program Management Council, brief yesterday to know leadership. So these are really watched and have very high visibility a lot of times, and it goes right up to the top of NOAA. So that's important. And then communications, and maybe moving forward, especially in the coming year, communicating what we're doing and the value of what we're doing is more important than ever. So again, a little bit about the coordination. To get things started right, we're going to ask you, if you have a project in one of the supplementals maybe coming up, we're going to ask you for a project plan. They are essential at the beginning, and they need to be robust and lots of detail. There's talk of adding, we might need to add a transition plan into this mix of things we need. We'll have that as maybe a discussion point later. But we are often busy with weekly meetings on budget, program, and executives, just making sure everything's working. You have the resources like HPC that you need. If there are hiring problems or supply chain issues, we kind of monitor that. And leading up to, like I mentioned yesterday's PMC, or Program Management Council, but before we do one of those, we have the quarterly project reviews. This is sort of the check-in time. Now, to lighten the load on this a little bit, we kind of utilize desk audit options, and that's probably something that we don't mind. So less having to present, update us with the information you need, you can still keep the PMC briefed. Now, our next speaker, Kevin, is going to go more in depth here. But I will say, having him, and I meant to go back to that other slide, he was the only name that was common to both columns was Kevin.
He's pretty uncommon, actually.
So having him as the DRSA HPC portfolio manager has been a great help. But some of the things happening, like he's got a more up-to-date graph here than I do on the left. I think that was more when C5 came online. Now we've got C6. And from the hardware standpoint, at OCIO, they go, here you go. Here's Gaia C6. You should be good, right? Well, sometimes that's not as smooth as we like. We do have problems with having C5 spun up. C6, we were trying to have that be less the case. We've had some success because even just recently, more close on there, the data sets, security issues, etc. So HPC is not in my wheelhouse. I should mention at the beginning, I've got over 4 decades of experience in the web enterprise, but not so much in the program project management and not so much in HPC. But for Chris and I, if we can put the people in the projects in touch with the people that can help them utilize the HPC, then we've at least done something to help out. Again, reporting is part of that original graphic there, and we talked about this. We're also going to ask you, or anytime you're in a project that's getting reported up, for scoring risk and issues. You can have some of your own, but we're asking you to score the ones that could be pertinent to all the projects, so we can get kind of an average score and report the status of that up to the NOAA leadership. Okay, smart sheet. NOAA is moving in. Trying shaking his head. NOAA is moving in this direction. We have tried, meaning Chris and I, have tried to make it easier for project managers who have no familiarity with Smartsheet to be able to utilize the automated Smartsheet email. Some of you in this room get those from me. And that's a way of bypassing knowing how to edit and go into Smartsheet. But NOAA's moving in that direction. I recommend that you eventually warm up to the process. Frank's going to show you kind of the project plans and sort of the quad charts from the spreadsheet. But again, everybody's trying to push us to this. So, and here's maybe one of the main reasons. So I'll let you in a little secret. When a project manager would brief at the QPR say, okay, I need to change these milestones because things are slipping. And you just made those changes. In Smartsheet, you can make those changes here in the start date and end date, but you're locked down to those baseline start and baseline end dates. So it'll show up as red to the people that monitor this that if, wait a second, there's been a change, we might need to talk about this. Is it a significant push to the right? Do we need to ask the PMC for a rebaseline request to be able to do that? We all need to be on the same page. So it's maybe in the past a little bit less of a real monitoring of these project milestones, but in Smartsheet, it's kind of inherently built in that we get notified of that. Now back to communications. And value is listed there by the little figure. We really need to show the value of the work that's being done. And we need to put it sometimes in very plain language, easy to understand, maybe even very visual format. So that's what we tried to do. We put, this is our latest ArcGIS story map, working with the H15 with Aaron and Will. And really, this was a team effort. You know, one of my coworkers, Tamara Bad, former coworker, she'd always say, teamwork is dream work. Well, this really was teamwork to get this done. So this, and you can scan the QR code. Not many documents that we produce can you share with your grandma. This one maybe, because it's written plain language enough that hopefully it just reaches anybody. Even Congress should be able to understand. So that's where we're going with sometimes.
Hey, Ben, I do want to add a comment on the web story. My mom understood it when I sent it to her. And she was a 45-year nurse, doesn't know anything about weather other than it falls on her. So yeah, I think you're right. We did capture that pretty well.
Well, good, thanks. And yeah, the feedback we've had has been very positive. I've been president of the local AMS club in Central Virginia, shared it with my club members. Not all of them are meteorologists. We're just weather enthusiasts, but this and the other ones, this is our fifth one, Chris, that we've been involved in? I think so. So anyway, this is getting towards where are we going? What are the challenges that we're facing? So as I mentioned, tens of millions of dollars with these supplementals, lots of money. So at one point we were kind of managing co-managing $170 million worth of funds. Now I should have said at the beginning, not only a small percentage of that actually comes through WPO. And in recent supplementals, that's been more siloed to the line offices. So we do have to do less of what's called popping or transferring money between line offices. But because Congress has asked us to do this, expectations are high, the lead time is short. We're going to cover a little later, maybe just what can you do if you have an idea for a future supplemental related to hurricanes, or maybe continuing the work that you're doing now. There are some of the funding constraints. We want to make it as best we can. Chris and I want to let the scientists do the science. We're not trying to burden you with project plan write-ups, transition plan write-ups, QPR presentation, but a lot of what we're doing, we have to because it's dictated. But we do try to lighten that load. And a lot of times there can be project dependencies. And that's probably becoming more and more as we move to the newer ones. I know in BIL they have a number of project dependencies within the social science group there. And then I have on here supplementals may come, more of them. I think it will come. But what will they look like? How much money will we have to work with? If there's more conflict on the Hill about what they can pass for a budget, then the supplementals, there's more chance for agreement on the supplementals to get those done. Now, I don't have any inside information on when the next one will come. There's all kind of rumors, but with the current hurricane season having done what it did, and we're not done, and wildfires have been a real problem. Even the smoke last summer that came from the Eastern Canada wildfires drifted over DC. So, catching attention of the lawmakers. So with that, I'll kind of finish up and just say we can take some questions now. I think we have time, but really we're going to have a Q&A session time that will really allow us to breathe. So if you don't have any questions right now, though, for me.
Yeah, about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. We can go to the next. We can save save some time at the end.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. So next up, we have Kevin Garrett, who will share his lessons learned in his various roles in the supplemental. He's been a project manager, and he is currently the SAEC portfolio manager, and he served in various capacities at 2 different offices. So,
yeah, so I remain in the supplement program, especially in NWS, but happy to support kind of Chris do an excellent job managing so many projects and all the successes that come out of the supplemental. So one thing I'll talk about today is the ongoing challenge across that time period as well in terms of getting and managing the HPC resources to support this work. So I do have one housekeeping announcement to make. I have lots of happy hour tickets, maybe one for everybody in here. So just let me know if you need some this afternoon. I'll be heading out before them. So yeah, so just quickly I'll run through the outline here. I'll give a quick overview of NOAA's or the HPCS environment. I know there's some talks this afternoon, so hopefully there's not too much overlap with what will be discussed then. Trying to keep this focused more on the context of the supplementals. I did want to talk a little bit about the allocation process, and this is something that's sort of undergoing an internal review with NOAA on how to sort of re-engineer that. So I might, I'll get into maybe what will happen in the future for allocating HPC resources. I'll then get more specific to the supplementals, how the resources have been allocated in the past and with the current supplementals, and give a quick look at the usage, which speaks a lot about the challenges. And then I'll talk about those challenges and a lot of the lessons learned. We have many lessons learned through these experiences. And then I'll just spend a minute looking at maybe with some ideas and some future discussion topics on how to solve some of these challenges. I could use the clicker, I guess. All right, so first we're going to do a poll. So how many people here are using the NOAA RDHPCS environment? Yes, please raise your hands online as well. So okay, that's more than I expected. Well, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I figured, yeah. So maybe the next question is going to show some differences. So how many are using that environment to perform supplemental work? All right. Okay. So you're in the right place. I'm in the right place. All right. So yeah. So bottom line up front, acceleration of hurricane modeling is greatly benefited from disaster supplementals. I think you are all aware of really the advancements of HAFS in particular, EPH work in the previous supplementals that we're not really talking about today, to get those operational capabilities. But there is always an HPC tail that we're chasing. And I think we're starting to get ahead of that a little bit now with the IRA and DIL funding, purchasing some pretty large compute systems. So that's good to see, but certainly we can start applying those lessons learned to get the utilization of those systems a lot faster. So here's a quick overview of NOAA's RDHPCS environment, showing the geographic distribution of all of those platforms and some description of how powerful they are in terms of teraflops. So I'll talk about the details on the next slide, but this is growing. Fortunately for NOAA, this is growing, and we'll have some more resources coming online. I'll also mention I'm not going to talk too much about cloud. The supplementals have not been leveraging cloud that much. There have been some projects. I know our UFS, I think the FY18, the standalone land MP3 system, I think was leveraging, of course, the HAFS. But really hasn't been utilized maybe as much as it could have been. But that's a big effort, and it takes away from actually doing R&D to get this all the applications that are supported on the supplementals already. And so trying to get what you can out of the on-prem systems, I think, has been the approach. But again, that's sort of out there maybe for discussion in the future as well on the cloud strategy for the supplementals. So just a quick overview. So on the right there, again, showing the capacity and the petaflops. I can't do it depends. I can't do the math and how many compute core hours per month that adds up to. I think one of the usage slides shit is probably around 450 million. So compute hours. It depends on the technologies that are on those systems, and there's a long, there are older systems and newer systems. So it doesn't necessarily translate the same. So if we look at R&D HPC capacity and we include the WCOS2 dev system, we're at about 50.3. I think this has grown by several petaflops over just the last couple of years. I was looking at a white paper that Mark Gasparo and Hendrik drafted at STI a couple of years ago that sort of did this analysis and sort of the target where you want to be at in terms of the ratio between your R&D compute and your operational is around 5 or 6 to 1. I think at the time they wrote that white paper, it was at I think I saw 1 to 2, maybe 2 to 1, somewhere in there. So, but certainly what I'm calculating here, so we're about 3.5 to 1 if you include WCOS2, and this does not include, of course, some of those newer systems that are coming on hopefully in the next year. So looking at the RDHPCS allocation management, there is an NAO 216110 that defines the policy for NOAA HPC. I think it's about 20 years old. And so the terms you see there on the left, and then that's sort of the governance of our RDHPC. The only thing that exists in that NAO policy is the HPC board. There's like an environmental modeling team, there's all these things. So for some reason, we didn't follow the policy and we went a different direction. So I think there's a lot of talk about updating the NAO, of course, probably needed. But also, I sort of mentioned, sort of revisiting the allocation process and potentially a shift from the current structure with the allocation committee going under the ESID, the modeling team, perhaps having a few team that manages the allocation process. And that actually is, I think, it looks like that's more aligned with what the governance was 20 years ago. So I don't know if that's a coincidence or, it took 18 years to figure out that we need to actually follow the governance. But in any event, HPC board really is the board that sets the priorities and also what are the criteria for allocation. So they'll communicate those priorities. So typically the supplemental are the highest priority to get allocation. And then there are other criteria to sort of do that ranking. So there are some issues with that, because there's always projects that maybe don't even need a lot of compute, but they don't get any hours. And they always sort of stay at the bottom, even if they're relying off as priorities, which are the criteria. So there are definitely some challenges making sure that everybody is included, has access to these resources. So in any event, the allocation committee takes those priorities. I'll walk through the process on the next slide. And then they vote on the allocations, and then they talk to our HPCS and just get configured. The portfolio managers, there's several portfolios I'm sure you're aware of that manage the allocations. So we don't just manage them, we request them through the process, and then we manage them with our. So there will be several projects within the portfolio that are using the allocations, and it's up to us to kind of manage and shift things around as needed and help take care of any issues, technical issues that may arise, preventing the use of the HPC. So the process, just looking across like the fiscal year, usually sometimes starting around Q3 of the fiscal year, the allocation committee will provide guidance to the portfolio managers, again, based on those HPC board priorities, and we'll set up a framework where those portfolio managers can reach out across their line offices to solicit any new projects that need HPC. In the past, it's kind of like a lot of people more put it in a slide template. And then there, again, regarding the new supplementals, there's a similar process, but typically it's done outside of the normal business of the portfolios. Get kind of a fence off what's needed specifically for supplementals to make sure that that's the highest priority, to make sure they understand what the need is, and then it can maybe be a little bit more efficient in executing. So again, after all the new needs are collected, portfolio managers brief back to the allocation committee and present how those needs align with the evaluation criteria. Again, it can be things such as how essential the projects are for its mission. Are these line office priorities? Are they HPC ready? Do they have experience using HPC in the past? Justifying what the need is for HPC. Obviously, in the modeling world creation, it's very obvious. And then the requests are logged, and then there's time for the AC members to vote. And once they've voted and awarded, again, they communicate with our HPCS admins to configure the applications on the systems, create the projects, so on and so forth. And then it's up to the project PIs to get new users on board to use those project allocations. So that usually happens by the end of the fiscal year. And then beginning of the next fiscal year, where those allocations are available, they're tracked, monitored. PMs can, if we're not using ours, we can donate our hours to other portfolios, either temporarily or permanently. And permanent movement of hours or resources has to be approved by the allocation committee. So again, there are lots of ups and downs across the project lifecycle. So this is maybe one thing that could be done and maybe a framework put around it to sort of facilitate more transfer of resources across portfolios. I know people get, you get resources, you don't want to lose them. But we've had, recent experiences, donating hours to Epic from the STI portfolio because we're not using that. And it's helped them out a lot. So I just want to acknowledge that, if you need hours, look at the usage, reach out to other portfolios and just ask. And usually they're pretty tough. All right, so Chris went over, Ben and Chris went over this a little bit in terms of the 18, 19, and 22 supplemental scope and the projects and the funding. So I'll focus on the bottom pieces of those boxes with the request of compute coming out of all those projects. Again, not all the projects need HPC, really just a subset. But in any event, FY18 request was about 55 million core hours per month across those projects. So a lot of that was through leveraging HERA, which is the follow-on to FIA, which provided a little bit more capacity in the FIA. And then pretty much all of the Orion system at the time that was built at MSU. And of course, JET as well. Resources were distributed across the relevant portfolios. So at the time, there was no new supplemental portfolio. The decision was made to just distribute those new resources across the current portfolios. Same was done in FY19. Again, leveraging some remaining hours on Orion. It was a lot smaller ask, about 24 million core hours per month. And there really wasn't, and we had about 10 million hours available to allocate new resources. And so, right, exactly. So, there was 14 million hours that projects needed that we didn't have. But so the decision was made to actually combine the needs of the projects and the new projects across within the portfolios across the two supplementals and sort of scale those new resources across the FY19 projects. So it was really sort of scaling, within the portfolio to allocate what was allocated previously. So actually some portfolios lost hours and to accommodate new portfolios, new projects within portfolios that didn't get any hours within FY18. And then FY22, 26 projects requested 85 million core hours. So as Ben mentioned, a lot of I guess it's many projects in FY18, but these are really good projects. A lot of compute. Of course, things involved where you need, you're doing ensemble work, you're doing higher resolution. There's a lot of wildfire air quality work that's pretty computationally expensive. So it's no surprise that the ask was a lot bigger. But again, when these projects started, there were no available resources. And so, basically those projects, some of them were, already associated with ongoing development work. So they were able to access the resources they had. But again, competing with other projects within those portfolios. But it really took a long time to actually, so I was probably the only portfolio manager for our HPCS that had zero resources to manage for like a year. So it was pretty easy, but also very frustrating because we wanted to get those dedicated resources to the projects to get that work moving faster than it was. Fortunately, I don't think there were too many delays to the projects, just given the fact that they had access to resources within the current portfolio structure and portfolio managers pretty accommodating and getting some resources to those teams. In any event, finally C6 came online in production about I think late July or late August of this year. And so that provided about 30 million core hours to the FY22 supplemental. And the rest of that machine is also supporting a lot of BIL and IRA work in addition to that. So And we will note that there is one project in FY22, a supplemental fire tent project that is leveraging GCP. All right, so looking at the usage, so I just wanted to pull a couple snapshots. The left one is looking at the usage of Orion from the date that it went into production in January of 2020 through the first 9 months or so. And so you can kind of see, maybe not pay too much attention to all the colors, but look at the black line and the dashed black line. Show the Orion total usage and the Orion total allocation. So you can see there's this sort of upward trend that took almost 9 months from when that system went into production to when it was being almost fully utilized. And so that's really an illustration of all of the time and work it needs to get these systems, reporting code, making sure the infrastructure, making sure the system is stable, and your jobs can run before you can actually start doing all the R&D. So that's a big challenge. And we keep buying new systems that are, they're new platforms, new architectures, and we think code is portable. Even when we say code is portable, it's not portable. It's not necessarily. And it also assumes the infrastructure and services and tools are there as well. So there's always a lot of work to do when there's a new on-prem system. On the right is the more recent one with C6. So again, that came online in around July, August of this year. And it's a similar scenario. Again, this is not just limited to the DRSA. A lot of those resources are also used by the IRA, as I mentioned. So you can see the total allocation of hours available is almost 200 core hours per month. 200 million core hours per month. But it's taken a few months to get up to using a little more than half that allocation. So again, I show a little bit of comparison below where just looking from the start date when those machines went into production for FY18, Orion was about 6 months after the FY18 project started. So they were again relying on existing resources within the RDHPCS environment to do their work until they had these new resources. For C6, as I alluded to, it was even worse, about 18 to 20 months. So that was a huge challenge, not having any resources for that period of time and having to rely on other portfolios. You can't get the work done that you want to get done in a timely fashion, and you're bringing other projects down. You're delaying what they're wanting to do. So competing for those resources. So that it's really, it's not a good situation. So here's a snapshot. I apologize, probably can't read. This is like a daily email we get on C6 usage. So this is from October 30th, which is pretty much highlighting the usage for that entire month across the portfolios in each of the projects that have allocations. So you can sort of see towards the middle of bottom of the DRSA projects. There's one project out of 10 that are using resources. Fortunately, they're using the entire allocation that the portfolio has, so that's great to see. That's for one. So, I'm thankful that you're able to do it. Yeah, that's HAFS. So, happy that this group here, or those online, are able to get HAFS ported over there and working and taking advantage of a machine. Like the first year of a machine that goes into production, like if you get on there, those resources are all yours. All the windfall. I mean, they're using 25 million hours of windfall, and there's no queue time, I'm sure. So, that's one thing. If you can get on there, get using the system as quickly as possible, get your work done, because sooner or later you're going to have some queue time. So, but this is good to see. But it's unfortunate. I'll talk about some of the challenges of the other projects that are really struggling to get stuff working for various reasons. And so that's what we're trying to do. Get bi-weekly or so calls with all PIs, and some of the RDHPCS system admins and others to try and work through the issues and make sure teams are leveraging, they share, particularly UFS, they're sharing infrastructure and things like that. So, leveraging what the other teams are doing and not trying to duplicate efforts. It's very challenging. It's like, oh, I need this version of Intel, and they need this version of Intel. There's maybe unified forecast system, and some of these tools that some of those that back end, like compilers and those sorts of things, where there's still a lot of differences, like Python, Intel, whatever. I haven't done any development in 8 or 9 years, so I'm sort of just talking about things that I might be aware of, but I'm falling off the expertise in the technical world, so bear with me when I mention these things. So yeah, this is an ongoing challenge, and so I think the last slide I'll talk about maybe how to get into these things. So just looking at the current overall HPC usage, so this is across all the current platforms. So this is showing the time series of what's been allocated across the systems and their usage between November of 23 and through last month. So again, you see that big delta again in the overall usage, where we're still about 100 million core hours shy, and that's mainly due to C6. So all the other systems are saturated and being used, which is good to see. But again, if you're probably working on the systems like on air, your jobs are probably set in queues. So, but you're in here, so you just let the machine do the work. Enjoy the conference. All right, so challenges and lessons learned. How am I doing on time?
You've got plenty.
I got plenty.
Ben went short, so you inherited all his
I'm
time.
going to take a sip of coffee.
It's like playing pressure luck. He passed all the chances to you for more whammies.
All right. So, probably the most obvious, those RDHPCA and CAP expansion relies on supplemental funding. And that acquisition and deployment is not phased with the project's timelines. So typically you get all the money at the same time, a lot faster to start the project. Word grants takes a lot longer to do an HPC acquisition. Get it shipped and put it in the facility and plug it in, turn it on. Everything built takes a long time. I say long time, probably. But you have to be diligent, do things right. So, but yeah, just getting it ready, so the projects can get on there. It's not fixed. That's the main. So if you don't have anything available to utilize, then you're just waiting, and that's going to delay projects. Then you got to re-baseline, and then as Ben showed, you can change the start date, and it goes red, and then the PMC says what's going on. New systems have unique architectures and environments. I sort of said that, and, it's great that we're getting systems every couple of years, but that puts a lot of burden on all the development teams, on the HAFS community in particular, because you probably feel like they're always porting code. Even on the systems you're using, they're doing updates. You O&M. It's not O&M. It's like, I don't know what it's called. R&M, research and meetings. Just to keep the code running on the current legacy platforms is an effort. And all of that takes away from doing science. So, this is something we have to do. This is a problem. We need to focus on separation concerns here. I'll get to that. But systems managed by different offices with different policies. I can, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've got RDHPCS. You have some systems now like C6 that are RDHPCS, but they're managed by GFDL. They have different policies. So like the Gaia and the rest of the RDHPCS systems, they're not identical in way we can do something. So we're hard to that. I'm hard to it. And then there's NCO and then cuts. So that's different too. So that's just another barrier to getting systems up and running and usable. And something we have to navigate. But that added complexity, again, is taking away from data science. Project development needs are not communicated ahead of time. So basically, I think the folks that are building these systems assume what you need. There's no communication ahead of time. Like you need the software stack and these services. There's always something to say. So this is also just adding to the timeline to get the system ready to use. I think you could be a lot more proactive and being engaged and getting ahead of that. It's not just infrastructure; it's data sets. I think we tried to put a lot of weight on Orion, but for HAFS, for the real time, they needed restricted data. So they needed to go through Niagara to get stuff, off HDSS. So, these were huge challenges that we didn't find out until the projects had the allocations on those systems. Like that's just inexcusable, honestly. So we need to do a lot better job coordinating. I think we have recently. Again, I'm going back like 5 years, but there's some huge lessons learned there that we're getting there. And then the allocation process. This is kind of an elephant in the room. And I understand that we're under a lot of resource constraints, and the allocation committee, like they're doing Jen Mahoney, and I think there's some way maybe David shows the new chair. They've done a tremendous job, given the hand they were dealt, with just not having adequate resources for all of the work that needs to be done. So it's they've basically been aligning allocation decisions with HPC board. It's basically come down to, is this supplemental work or not? If it's supplemental work, you get resources. If not, then it's a lot harder. The other thing I'll say is it's easy to allocate. It's not easy to unallocate. When the projects end, if you look on the AIM project list, I don't know how outdated it, like how many of those projects are actually active. Maybe still have resources. I even tried to get rid of or reduce some allocations on the Coast Flag last year. I said, we don't like 500 million hours. We don't need this. We're not using it. They're still there. So that's why I'm doing it. So it's really hard. It's really hard to take resources away from the portfolios.
We got them to stop using their disk space.
Yeah, the disk space. I'm not even talking about this. That's another issue. Get emails every month. Clean up your disks. Scratch retention is being violated. So yeah, I mean, there've been a lot of challenges. They've been navigated pretty, the best that they could have done through the allocation committee. But again, I think it's really hard to give up resources. Nobody wants to lose hours. So that's just adding to the barriers to get resources that new projects need. I mean, we'll go through allocation committee meetings where it's like, we don't have any new resources. Propose these new projects, but you're not getting any resources. So it's a fruitless exercise. All right, I don't want to go off on too many tangents. All right, so looking ahead, addressing the challenges. So obviously, better coordination with NCIO and the acquisition process. Even with NCO, I've been, particularly on the weather service side, a bit of an outsider in that process and how closely EMC works with NCO to make sure they've got the capacity and operations they need in the next 5 years to run operational systems. Are we going to need cloud in the future to do operational MVP, those sorts of things? We need to have good coordination to make sure on the R&D side, we've got systems that meet the requirements and the capacity. And on the operational side, the same thing. Need to make more codes more portable. There are several limits to portability. again, I don't know all the details, but, you know, I see, you know, UFS demonstrations of running a global system on a laptop within like an hour. Can't do that on prem systems. Maybe in a few months. So like you can run the systems. So again, like trying to develop where, and maybe this isn't possible, but trying to develop these applications that you know, are more generic. And I know like you have to deal with system updates and things they support. You know, they have to go back and fix code when it doesn't compile because they've updated the system. So all these challenges, I don't know what the solutions are, but you know, we need to maybe put some teams together to figure out, you know, what can be done to use this process, make it faster. I mentioned revisiting the allocation process, both portfolio and project structure. So not just like how we allocate, make decisions about allocating, but who we're allocating to. Maybe there's a more efficient structure than the current portfolio structure that makes sense. You know, aligning more by maybe UFS application, not by line office, things like that. So, so again, this is something I don't know the answers to, but maybe could be revisited. And potential opportunities of the allocation, those that are deciding the allocations, you know, are under new governance structure. And then dedicated infrastructure team supporting their research. You know, again, this is a separation of concerns and like ensuring the developers can still do R&D, and we don't have to worry about porting code and doing maintenance and all that stuff. There are some elements that exist, and I think the GDIT contract has a couple of folks that I think that we talked about today in terms of supporting the research and development community to get these codes running on the new on-prem or on the cloud. Some elements exist in Epic, but Epic is stretched really thin, and honestly, like they should be focused on like the broader community and supporting their use of UFS applications. But you know, they've done a lot of work to help the internal node UFS community in a lot of these challenges. But again, having like a more dedicated team that focuses on these problems, we're going to continue to buy big HPC every couple of years, which I assume we will. You know, helping to support and accelerate. And then a cloud strategy for R&D. That's been a big challenge. We've had a lot of resources in the cloud in the past, and they've gone underutilized. Even with efforts to bring folks on to support code to the cloud. And then the result from that, if you're not using the resources, they're not going to get So trying to be more agile in terms of how to get cloud resources, I think would go a long way. So we don't have to worry about whether or not we're burning all the hours within a certain time frame. Being able to load money on contracts as we need to, things like that. Maybe these things are in the works. I know they've extended the retention period of the cloud HPC. So we're not fiscally good with fiscally good. More can be done, but again, like how are we going to leverage this for research? It can get pretty expensive, you know, doing develop like a procedural forecast system you want to run, like big ensemble, you know, like 9-month forecasts for a long time. It's going to cost like millions of dollars. The reforecast is going to cost millions of dollars. Routine R&D on the cloud will cost a lot of money. You know, so you don't want researchers like, I don't want to run this job, and, you know, I'm just going to waste hours and fails. Go back. So all that can add up. So we need a good cloud strategy for R&D. What makes sense? All right. I'm not research. So just bringing it all back to sort of the R&D to operational compute ratio. So again, I mentioned the new systems coming online. I think that's the area recap. So it's another 5 petaflops. Actually didn't factor in if Parrot actually goes away. It's just a replacement. But RIA, that's a big machine. I think it's about 15 petaflop. I don't know if they know what they're getting at to make that determination, but I think it's going to be around 15 or 20 petaflop. That's a big issue. And that's really going to help out. As BJ alluded to yesterday, getting some actual new resources, to do a lot more stuff. So, and then I thought I just put a picture of the workforce jet in there. Maybe lighten everybody up after this talk. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We're going to get to our last speaker now, but of course, last but not least, my involvement with the supplemental program goes back only quite 5 years. But Frank Marks goes back a little bit more. So he's going to clean up here. And again, we're trying to save some time for Q&A at the end. That'll cover all the talks, but also we have some discussion topics that we can also bring up. So, Frank, it's all yours. And I just learned from you here this week that I guess the very first supplemental was 56. Is that right?
Yep.
All right, it's all yours, Frank. Thank you.
Okay, so they asked me.
Hey, Frank, hold on a second. We're getting the slides up online.
Yeah, well, I can start.
Yeah.
So they asked me to talk about hurricane supplementals over the years, which I thought, okay, I'll start with the first one, which was 1956, and that was the formation of the National Hurricane Research Program. Without that, there would be no HRD, there would be no NHC, or they would be a lot different than they are today. Thanks to Bob Simpson, who really kind of built both of those out of that one supplement.
You're good.
Okay, next slide, please. So one thing to know about hurricane research, we're doing next, okay, is that almost all advancements in hurricane research are directly tied to supplementals. We do have base budgets thanks to that first supplemental, the National Hurricane Research Program. But since then, almost any advancements we've had have been driven through a supplemental. 73, we purchased 2 WP3Ds. 96, after Andrew, we purchased a G4 SP. 2008 was the first one I really got involved with, and that was the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project, which led to HFIP. 2013, a lot of people don't remember, but that was after Hurricane Sandy, and that resulted in something called a high impact weather something program, which led to HMON. HMON came out of HIWTP. 2018, 19, 22, and 23 we've heard about, but I want to just point out a couple of things. 2018 led to UFS and HAFS V1. And I'll talk a lot about that because that's the one I would use as an example. 2019, the hurricane floods and wildfires led to HAFS DA efforts, a big push there. And DSRA is the one that's second of all the computer plan on C6. That's the updates to HAFS V2 and V3. And then the infrastructure, a lot of people don't know that IIJA was providing the money to buy 2 G550s and 2 WC130s that we're going to have in the future as our new platforms for observation. So if we don't go after funds and supplementals, we're not going to go. That's the bottom line. I also want to take a moment to thank Ben and Chris before I get into what it means to be a program manager, because I've been working with those two guys now for about 6 years, 7 years. And I'm going to show you where it was like when we started. And I will say I had problems with smart sheets, but the way it works right now for the QPRs, you guys have done a great job. And I also think you've done a great job. As far as our DHPC, without people in the program at EMC and HAFS, like Zujin and VJ and Avijo, managing all of this computer power. The only reason that I think we're jumping on C6 now is because we've been doing this like our 4th or 5th transition on HPC. So practice Doesn't make perfect, but it makes things work better. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, I've served as a programmer, co-program manager now for 3 of these things. And the first one in 2018 was really the one that mattered the most, I think, in setting up the way we work now. It was obviously for the program managers a big challenge because, oh my God, I got to. Now, one thing you need to know about supplementals, the part that we get to work on is like 1/20th of the total supplemental. Most of the supplemental funds are going to the disaster areas to build back the infrastructure, government infrastructure, primarily, that was damaged or destroyed or deeply affected by the event, whether it be a fire or hurricane. So, I mean, we're working in the area where they say advancements, which is usually a small part. It's even smaller than the part for HPC. HPC is about 5 times typically of what we get to use for the projects. So what Ben and Chris are managing are very important to us, but in terms of the bigger picture, they're kind of in the noise of the money that's spent. But it is the most effective in planning for the future, in my mind. So the first one, we really benefit. I actually was funded under the way they did it. They had some OER projects with OER project leads and some NWS projects and NWS project leads. I actually got the lead in NWS project. 3A1. 3A2 was an NWS project as well, which was Abichel. And what we did, we just had done the new HFIP Strategic Plan, which I think you're going to talk about the next one today, so keep that in mind. So we had this new strategic plan that said, okay, we need HAFS, and this supplemental drops in our lap. So the group of us who had been working under HFIP worked together to lay out a strategy to do HAFS under as many of the projects we could under that first supplemental. And you see on here, I say we were accelerating implementation of the updated HFIP plan, which was HAFS, was the highest priority. So accelerate improvements in RI then overlapped with one project that Global had on moving nests. So moving nests was a separate project. 3A2 was the basic HAFS operational code that Albichel was doing. And so my project was kind of, okay, give money to both of those things. How do we spread the money out so that we can make the most use of it? Accelerate model system development had overlaps. Accelerate data assimilation. We had the 4A projects for DA. We had 2 of those. One was to get more drop zones in the air, which you heard from Sarah and Jason, the impacts that we've gotten from those drop zones. And then the studies that Sarah reported on, some of that was first funded under this to show the impact of those drop zones. And then 3B was an ocean. We were saying, okay, we need ocean ops. Somebody like Ken Sook benefited from that support to work on the ocean side. So we used the HFIP Strategic Plan. We mapped it onto this supplemental. We laid out who can do what by EMC, ALML, who do we have, CLOSAP. We had a whole bunch of different groups that we were working together to lay it out. And I think that strategy set us up for the future of making progress. Also, we were identifying HPC needs. What is NHC? What is EMC going to need? What is ALML going to need? And we were only working from JET at 18. Orion was just a dream. We had Thea and we had WCOS sitting over at the operation, but almost all of the development from EMC was going on Thea, which became Gaia. But not Gaia, became Hera. But we were doing this mixing and matching. And I tell you, the work done by Vijay, Dujain Gopal, and Abichel to manage those resources were critical because we had like 5 million, maybe 10 million hours total of CPU usage and certain disk storage. And so, again, the partnership that HFIP provides is a great way to leverage the usage, as well as the program development. And that has been carried through. The next project was HU2, which Jason Simple was a key player in, to develop and test the A capability for that moving nest. The original HAFS was static, large domain, high resolution, but we were developing the moving nest. Once the moving nest, Bill Gramson got the moving nest working, boy, HAFS came together within 3 months because we had done all the plumbing already with the large net, with the large one, testing the physics, getting some DA stuff done, the vortex initialization. And so the idea was to push that project was to push it from RL7 to 8, and then hopefully EMC would pick it up and get it over to NCO at 9. And so, you know, the other thing that I did in that project, we had talked about social behavioral and economic science as part of the new HFIP Strategic Plan, which was based on the Weather Act directives. And so I took about $250K out of that project. I gave it to Gina, the Oscar, and I said, what can I help you fund that would start to make benefits on the social behavioral economic science goals we have in HFIP? And so we had this project from NCAR to look at a longitudinal surveys of people affected by hurricanes over time to see how their reaction to the event changed, how their interpretation of forecasts changed with time. And so they were able to put in place within a year a survey. They used a survey company. They went through all the guidelines they had to go to get a survey out there like that, and to set it up. And we did 2 storms. I can't even remember the names of it. 2017, maybe Jess, you can remember.
And you have Laura and Marco.
Laura and Marco. Yeah, Marco was approaching Louisiana as a strong tropical storm, maybe becoming a hurricane. And Laura was coming into the Gulf. And so we had 2 storms going on at the same time, and we wanted to see their reaction. And they did it over 3 days. They got 3 different snapshots so that we could see that people weren't doing that. And that became, that got funded by Gina over the next 2 years, so that we kept doing that. And we've now done, I think, 5 storms, 5 events where they've been doing this tracking so that we can see how people react to our products. And I think that's going to be a very key part of the tropical roadmap development of, you know, understanding what do we need to focus on. So that was another Benny we got out of 2019. 2022, I am peripheral. I'm a co-lead with Vijay and Avichal. It's really focused on bringing HAFS to the next generation and the development of a HAFS coupled to MOM6. You've heard from Don Suk and others about how we're doing there. That's been a great addition. Development of the testing of the HAFS ensemble, which we've heard about, and the development and testing of the multi-moving nests. So these are projects underway that 2022 is about. Okay, so that's the kind of one, that's my experience. So I want to talk a little bit about the process for those of you who are interested. Next. So Ben talked about developing a project plan. Project plans have to be approved up the line. So realize that. I give you that cover sheet of who I had to report to get a project plan supported. You're going to get a total cost. And let me tell you, go in high, let them push you down. Because, you know, be bold of what you want money for. Don't say, oh, well, you know, don't be a miser. Go for what you need. They're going to cut you back because there's going to be a lot of projects. They want to fund as many projects as they can. I think we went in for 10 million and ended up with 8, but we spread it over 5 projects. And so the other thing is background. And the period of performance is always going to be 2 or 3 years. So realize that you're going to get squeezed. But the background, use HFIP Strategic Plan. Come on, we've already laid out what our priorities are. You don't map onto those like you're doing right now for your proposals to WPO. You know, you're missing the boat. The HFIP strategic plan has been boiled down of what our focus is. Pick a goal that's in there and go for it. And remember, you're going to have 2 or 3 years. It's kind of like a JTDI proposal, except it's a bigger. Scope and description, be specific. What are your deliverables? What is your scope? What is you really going to do? What are you tackling that is important? What is the benefit to NOAA and the U.S. government going to be? Because remember, this is stuff that is really supposed to be very beneficial. I mean, that's what a supplemental is all about. So be very specific on what your goal, your scope and description. Deliverables and the schedule with milestones is a key. Map it out the best you can and say a spreadsheet of what you think you can do. And also look at your risks. High performance computing, we heard from Kevin. Don't skimp on that. You know, don't say, oh, I had 5 million hours a month last year. But what do I need? You know, really work with your partners. And the HBC managers we have, like Vijay, Sujin, Gopal, or Abhijal, that have already been doing this. Talk to them about it because they're looking at what we're already using and how we can take in more. And remember, 2 or 3 years, it's going to go away. So, you know, time frames. Another big risk is, do you have the people? Or do you need to go out and hire somebody or get a contract? Those always take more time. Transferring money from a supplemental to a no office, that's easy. Getting a contract, not so easy. You have to have an agreement. You have lawyers involved. It takes probably a year to set something like that up. If you can bop it through a no office and have it go to a CI or to a subcontractor or a university partner, it's a lot easier. University partners, that's a little bit more involved. They're going through the grants office. Grants is slow. Remember that. They're not fast. They're gonna take their sweet time. And yes, supplementals get priority in their list, but it'll take longer than just bopping it through a no. Milestones are a key. Be reasonable and be realistic. Don't be overambitious. I'll give you an example. The HAFS project 381. Oh, we're going to update WCOS. The WCOS 2, there's going to be a moratorium on the computing system for 6 months. In our business, 1 month loss, you're into the next season. You've lost the season. Be realistic. You'll see in my project when I show you my summary, that was something we didn't anticipate as a risk, but that happens. We lost a whole year. It was good. It gave us an extra year to do the work, but we went into the red. Hey, we're behind. One thing I'll say about the risks and how they're handled, I'll give you 2 examples. One of the things we found with HU2 and the new one is we don't have enough people doing DA work. We kept bringing it up. We can't hire the people that we need to do this work. They don't exist. The result, now we have a DA consortium that NOAA put together. That came from our angst of not having the manpower to do the work we do. Another example is we talked about getting the data into Orion. Here we had this beautiful computer that Kevin just talked about. And we had people on it, but we couldn't get the data because some of it was restricted. We could get some of the data, but not all of it. And so that delayed a lot of projects getting started. We had people moving over to JET or to HARA just so they could get access to the data to do the work. Remember, we are driven also in our developments by what we call the Hurricane Research Experiments every year, real-time experiments, usually. And so we start those in August. If you don't get your stuff running by August 1st or tested, you're not going to be in the Hurricane real-time experiment, or you're going to be delayed and you're going to have to catch up. So these are the kind of things that, we work with the project managers. We bring stuff up as our problems as we work through these projects. and then they get addressed at the higher level. We were able to get access through, I forget the name you called it, the East computer, that we were able to get the data flow through there. It was not real time, but we actually got the data so that people could do that work. After milestones, cost breakdown, internal and external. I want to thank the folks at the CIs that I worked with that really helped us, because those are the people that were doing the reporting as well through the grants office. If you have a partner who's a contractor or a university PI, they have to report just like I do quarterly through the grants office on their progress. So you want to coordinate your inputs so that when I'm talking to Ben and Chris about at the QPR, my CI partner, in the case of Sandy Hazelton, who's really, and Jim Zhang were my two key people, they're reporting up through the university the same information. What did you accomplish? What is the things that you did? How are you doing on the milestones? The other thing is assumptions and external constraint and dependencies. I showed you that in the FY18, I had dependencies with about 5 different projects. If you have a dependency that if 3A2 doesn't get the code up and running, 3A1 can't do X, you have these timelines, and if somebody slips, the whole thing has to be slipped. So these assumptions and external constraints are not only to point out to people that you have them, but you better be coordinating closely with that person or group or project that you have a constraint or a dependency on. Another dependency is HPC. You can't get access to it. Another dependency is, can you hire somebody? Do you have a process? Do you have a way to get that hired? So when we look at these things, and then contractual requirements, do you have a contract that has to be dispersed? Because you're responsible. Once Ben and Chris get the money to the project manager, if he has a dependency, either a no facility or CI, I have to make sure I can get that money there before the end of the fiscal year or whatever the time constraint is. And so this is a big issue. Okay, after you get the development project plan, if you get funded, okay, now your job is report, communicate, make sure that Ben and Chris know what the heck is going on. We have to, originally it was a PowerPoint, so I'll show you how we did it, but we've gone to smart sheets, and while it was hard to get there, it is better. We have to track the budget. You have to track the milestones, the deliverables, the HBC usage, the contracts. You have to identify issues and risks. What are the risks that you have? What are the issues you're getting as you're moving forward? And then, of course, you have to prepare a final report when it's all said and done. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is how the project looks. This is the old way we did it on quad charts. You have the name of the project, the overall status, yellow, green, red, whatever it is. And red is management needs to address or help. Yellow means we're working on it. Maybe it's okay. Green means, oh, everything's going great. And so, you have the major milestones up in the top right. What am I going to do? When is it going to be completed? Did I complete it? What its status is? Final deliverable. And if I had a note there that said, we want a year extension because of WRS to do a whole test to make sure what we said we did. And I said, no cost extension. I'll give it to you as soon as we get the results from this season. And then in the bottom left are the issues and risks response there. So it's like, are all the allocations obligated? Yeah, we got it. Are all the contracts dispersed? Yeah, we did that. And then on the side on the budget is the, who I was giving money to, how much I was giving to them. Tim, you got a couple thousand K, and then was it obligated? Did Tim really take it and I don't have to worry about it anymore? Yeah, okay, good. GFL's got the money. I'm not worried about it. Next slide. And so here's the milestone chart. You have a major milestone and you can have sub-milestones. So if you look under the major milestone, I had GFD tracker modified. Tim did that. Okay, that was great. Completed on schedule. Native bridge storm tracker done. Okay, yeah, that was done. Completed on schedule. And you know, these are the last one, I think. So it's a lot of them are completed, but you can see how we were tracking these things and when they were due. Next slide, please. And then provide the evaluation. That was always the key thing. I mean, yeah, we developed a model. Was that any good? Did it do what we said it was going to do? And then HAFS V 0.3 initial operational capability. And then the final deliverable was FY22 Q4 when we finally evaluated the FY23, FY21 runs, FY22, sorry, from the storm. Next one, please. Yeah, and then of course I had to check the project status. Yeah, I gave Tim his money. I gave Val his money. I gave Alvin money. I took some, which went to Andy at Siemens. And then I had Jim Nelson because I wanted to have rainfall evaluation. So we had WPC in the mix as one of our project subs. Go ahead. And then HPC resources. And I want to thank Sujin and Gopal for helping me with this because it was always, okay, what did we do? You know, we were allocated 5 million hours. Did we use them? Yeah. Okay. Well, sometimes we use 10, sometimes we use 9, sometimes it's 14. Well, how did that happen? We're running and comparing using windfall, swapping and trading with EMC. Oh, you need it for this thing. You got to do your 3-year perspective. You take it now. Okay, then we'll use it now. And so we were able, as Kevin pointed out, take advantage of windfalls like we are right now on C6. Next slide. And now here we come to the risks and issues. I combined them together. Basically, we had this grid, you know, what are your risks? What are the impact? What's the likelihood of the risk? And so you had to map, you know, are you, how risky are you? And what's the likelihood you're going to have an impact? And so we would track things like sufficient RD HPC support. Yeah, okay, we're good on that. We're stable. We're not dropping. We're not going up. Hiring and retention of specialized contractor scientists. Ensuring Orion has all the necessary software, infrastructure, and data. These were issues that we were addressing that we mitigated or we solved. Problems related to COVID-19 dropped in there. And that was always an issue as we went through these projects. So we had to track all of this stuff. Obviously, timely execution of project plans. That was the W cost problem. We had to mitigate that across all the different projects sub-projects that we were working. Next one. And then the final report. You got to give a summary table of final deliverables, products completed, brief description of the final deliverables and products. I mean, it's not hard. You do a project report for any contract, but it's basically, you know, you got to go through the issues, brief summary of the benefits and outcomes of deliverables. These are all things that are going to be culled by and Chris and sent up to the committee to say, oh yeah, look at all the good things we did. Also, I think this also benefits them when they do their storyboards or their monthly summaries. You know, they take that, they cull that information like anything else to put into their reports that go up the chain, and that's how we get noticed in our communications. Links to the projects, list of publications, you know, local publications, and then you have an area where you can stick some figures in to kind of give them some, you know, eye candy that they can put in their report from, say, one of our briefings here. Next one. So I've kind of talked about the process. It is, if you're going to tackle it, it is worthwhile. It is not trivial. If you've done proposals for any agency, it's not much different. It has a short time fuse, just like a proposal. It has pretty much the same needs. So my expectations for the future, I'm not a federal employee anymore. I'm a volunteer, but I can speak from my experience of 45 years. There will be more supplementals tied to TCs and Socio-Economic. guaranteed. I mean, this year, we could see it already coming. It's not going away. It is our key vehicle for growth and improvement, building capacity that we need to keep doing the things we put in our strategic plan. How we do an implementation plan is going to be pieces of a supplemental. It's a shot in the arm. Use incurred budget climate is primary rate of enhanced TC research capacity. We're in flat budgets, if not shrinking budgets. Okay, and so supplementals are manna from heaven. Okay, take advantage of it. For you researchers, focus and coordinate research objectives with operational needs. That is a surefire way to ensure that your supplemental project will work. And definitely map it onto whatever the supplemental says are the highest priorities. And I'm hopeful that going forward, the HFIP Strategic Plan will keep feeding those requirements as far as TCs are going. So when you hear about the strategic plan today, please look at that as a potential roadmap for future supplemental proposals. Collaborate with NOAA labs, federal agencies, the Navy, NASA, CIs and academia, NCAR, I include academia, to increase your research capacity. Invariably, in the last few supplementals, there's no funds for federal salaries. Okay, don't look for federal salaries. You're not going to get it. It's to build your capacity out through collaboration with other agencies, CIs, academia, NCAR, and that's how you're going to build your capacity. What NOAA is providing is what Kevin talked about. We got the money. We have the HPC resources. We have the needs. You want to work with us? Those are the things we can give you. All right. You're getting money to work with those tools. And so focus on that aspect. Yeah, it's a great way to do science, but if it's not mapped onto the need, you're probably not going to get your supplemental proposal. If you're a federal program manager, utilize the Weather Act and the HFIP Strategic Plan to prioritize your supplemental TC research objectives. And then go out and find those colleagues and collaborators in the research community that you know can do the work and that you can work with as the program manager. Disperse the money to get the job done. In terms of WPO and NWSDI, utilize HFIP to work across line offices and to coordinate TC research objectives in supplementals. We have the roadmap. Take advantage of that. We've identified at least the research needs, and they better be mapped onto operational needs because that's the way HFIP works. So if, say, the problem is, the rainfall and mountainous terrain after hurricane landfall, okay, what part of the HFIP strategic plan can we map onto that? And what do we need to do? Is it microphysics work? Is it the data assimilation? Is it, hydrology? Go find, a land surface model guys who do hydrology work and get them to collaborate with you. We're going to give them the hurricane information, but they are going to provide the value that we need to address the supplemental. And so with that, I'll stop. I don't want to give any more advice. I'm here to answer questions and give advice if you ask me. But that's my experience and my view of where we're going and how to get there. Thank you.
All right, this time, what's the total end time for this session? Remind me. The 10
Oh, we passed that an hour.
15.
All right, that's a lot. And Paul, if you could pull up from my slideshow, the very last slide, that'd be great. And Kevin, you can stay there if you want. Frank, wherever you're more comfortable. But I wanted to bring up the very last slide, number 24. In the time that remains, and I was really trying to make sure we had some time to talk about this. These are just to spur some of the conversation. But now we're going to open up for questions. Again, you can use the topics that, they were there, as a prompt if you need. But question time now for anyone. I'll give it. Here, I'll get this first one.
This is six. Even project PI didn't have a plan from the beginning. So I assume it's working the same way with other HPCs. So I didn't bother to take it in. But at the end of October, I could log in, C6, it didn't let me. So I ended up submitting a myself to my PI, my name. And it took the paperwork came out and turned to me, it took on 1 week. So that is the first obstacle that I looked at it. And the second obstacle, I'm not quite sure whether there's any access already ready, in the C6 to run apps, for example, or HFIP. Mom 6 is fine. The GFDL is running Mom 6 all the time. But HFIP, we don't know yet. So, but according to the chart, usage of the C6, apparently it's worked through at the NC using quite a lot. That means that is there. Now, I want to do as, C6, that's another set of specs that's required. That is question. So, according to Kevin, report is now working for C6, but how the HAFS team was able to run it?
Ask the Jim.
Ben, I think, has a response for that.
Yeah, I can answer some of your questions. Based on my, yeah, you have to submit the request for users yourself, the project leader. But that, my experience, you can just submit it and
One week.
that's not my experience. Anyway, so another one is that HAFS can be run on C6. And the local issue, I think the admin is still working on it because we have to use S-Chrome instead of Chrome. And what the workaround is that we can just submit a full, just loop through it in the background. So that's the workaround. Yeah, it's using just the bash job.
Okay.
Just loop through it. And we have another issues, and we are still working on. Yes, to answer your question, the Spark stack library we can use it. There's no issue, but I'm not sure about the data.
Yeah, just to go back a little bit. So, we were communicating with the project PIs were on C6. So I'm not quite sure where the communication breakdown of the interaction. People don't have accounts on the systems, even in our PCS and the PIs that have accounts. So somewhere along the line, there's communication breakdown. You're not the only one. You have to have an account. So we have set up regular meetings. I think you've been included in those where all the PIs get together to walk through technical issues that everybody's having and also to coordinate. So I know there's an NOS +2 project that also is working on getting installed. I think there's a GitHub discussion on it as well. There's support from Joint Center, others. So I think we're going to try and shoot for the next meeting next week just to get a progress. So, but yeah, we're trying to work through these issues. The cron path as a policy, I guess, what I talked about, different administrators have different policies on these systems. For whatever reason, a technical issue with cron path, decided to do a best on it. But they're dedicated to work with us to get it.
Yeah, and I think there's, OAR dedicated HPC usage group. Who's on that now?
So Jim,
So Zujin is our one of our representatives on the HBC users group for okay. So if you're having issues, get them to the gym so we can raise it up to the users.
So you have from the word you have 3 months on this question. It has he needs to use my so you have 3 months. That one is sitting. The other one is she has.
Yeah, I'll just quickly note that.
Well,
Yeah, this is kind of a project execution question. This is Wallace at the Hurricane Center. Frank, you were talking about some things that were a little fuzzy to me. So you mentioned like popping money. You know, it's easy. Contract can take a year. The grants are hard, they take time. So I don't know if this is a question for Kevin, Ben, or Frank, but just in terms of executing, is there an optimal way that you've seen project leads execute efficiently, or giving advice?
so first of all, if the money is coming to another facility, usually they don't have a problem offering that money straight to you. What happens then is, are you going to use, you can't use it for fed salary, so how are you going to disperse it? If you have a contract, you better line that up before, while you're doing the setup. If it's a CI or a university, make sure they're working with their grants office to identify how they have to put in their requests. Because what's going to happen is if you've listed them, and I think the way it works now, you've listed a university partner, whether it be a CI or a university or whatever. They're going to send that money to them, but through grants. So they'll get a request for grants. That's what related to that transfer. And so the issue you have as a program manager, you've got them all lined up. Like I got Andy hired him, Ricky's ready to do a job. He can't get any money. So you've got to go through the grants office. So he's working, through the CI on the project, and the money hasn't gotten to him yet, but then all of a sudden it gets there and he's okay. But, there's always this budget dance that has to go on. And I can tell you, some people won't do a damn thing until they actually get the money. Okay, CMS has been very cooperative with that. But some contractors, whether it's university or not, they might not do it maybe until they actually say, no, I know Sarah has that issue, so I'm sensitive. So it depends on who you're working with. And find that out before you partner with them, because it'll help you line up grants, help them get their proposal through grants in a timely manner. And I can tell you, the faster you do it, get in the front of the line, grants will deal with it first. Don't wait. Have them ready with the proposals the minute they get the email. Boom, the proposal's on their desk at grants. You can do that. You get in the front of the queue and things will run. So if you wait, dither about and say, oh, I don't know if I've got to do this, that, you're going to get at the back. That's my experience.
I'll just add to that. So in the past, GMP's been really good about hosting seminars specific to supplementals like speeding up grants. So they're good at providing the guidance that helps. But it's 90 days to award once it's submitted. So super different award. Contracts too, I could talk a little bit about that. Typically, if there's an existing contract, you can do a task order, you can do an existing task order. They just require a separate claim to track the accounting. But you even got like sole source contracts, non-competitive grants, those sorts of things. But, there are a lot of options. Doing a new contract, the time it takes to award really depends on the company. In a lot of cases, so
So while Chris is going to the next question, there was a question online from Dave Jones. So Dave, to answer something, well, he had a bunch of questions, but yes, people are benefiting who are affected by a disaster are definitely benefiting from the supplemental. That is not what we're talking about. The money we're talking about is usually listed as advancements to improve whatever. And so we always go in and do that. That's typically, 5% of the total amount of money that's in the supplemental. most of the bulk of the supplemental money is going to the disaster impacted area to help the people that were affected. And so we're talking about the loose change that is available to make advancements. And then you asked about how many projects have been transitioned totally. Most of the supplemental projects try to get to 8, RL 8. That's our goal. I can tell you HAFS did get transitioned. It was a year behind, but it's one of them. And I know there's a number of them that have been transitioned. So I would say it's probably 50% got transitioned, right? My estimate. Either through what's gone into HAFS, different projects, or the things you've heard already, or that are but yeah, I would say it's, our goal is mainly to get it, it's like SBIR a little bit, in the sense that we're trying to get to a point where it could be used by somebody, Does that answer your question, David? Thank you.
Thanks, Frank, very much.
Okay, I have a question probably for still probably for Kevin. You were talking about the trade-offs between on-prem and cloud. Certainly the cloud would have the potential of bringing at least the hardware resource with the infrastructure, so we take just a lot of time to get everything loaded. But my question was in terms of the costs. At the scale that we're looking at buying, is it comparable? Is it 10% more on the cloud? Is it 5x more on the cloud? I don't really have even an order of magnitude guess on that, and I suspect you have some.
I don't have too much idea because I'm not really involved with, I would say, the support administration contracts piece to provide maintenance of the HPC. What's the annual cost of that? I have no knowledge of. That's a big factor, I think. So you do one-time acquisition, spend a lot of money, and maintain it. That's the annual cost for support contracts. So I don't know how, what if you're just going to the cloud and using like $1 million a year. That could just be for one project, whereas they're supporting multiple. So maybe somebody can speak to that this afternoon.
I'll give it to Kate when you're done. Let Kate and so we're ahead of you.
All right, I have a couple items. I guess the first one, going back to the discussion of the grant, how this can look from the CI side of things is that we get notice that we have to submit a grant within a week, and we do it. And then, we're waiting for probably 3 months, give or take, for the money to come in. And it can be interesting with our finance people. What they need is some confirmation from NOAA that the money will come. And then we can spend up to 90 days in advance, which matches about the time it takes for that to come in. But yeah, that's how it typically goes on the CI side. But yeah, that can move pretty smoothly as needed. One of the catches that we do run into with supplementals is that if we already have things set up for sending funds, we usually can't use them for supplementals because they're from Congress that they require their own separate grants. So that's a small challenge there that keeps it from going even faster. But the one that I'd had the biggest obstacle with respect to HPC, obviously getting new users on is always a challenge, but honestly, it's getting people set up to run basic NOAA models on the HPC systems and getting the support for doing that. Because typically you put in a help desk ticket and it goes nowhere. And sooner or later you talk to someone at a conference who's like, no, you got to talk to this scientist and ask them this question. So sooner or later we're like emailing Jason Sippel being like, well, how do we set this up? And not for anything, not for anything fancy or specific, just how do we run the current version of HWRF or HABS or whatever it is on this machine?
So I resonate with all of that. That's why it's so important for the project manager to coordinate with his partner ahead of time and to understand the dependencies that they're really lining up. I mean, just because you X thousands of dollars doesn't mean right away the project's going to go. There's all this stuff that dependencies are not just the money or the people, but it's the resources you need, the capacity you need to do things, and identifying what it takes to get you up. So one of the things that we really benefited from was HFIP was funding these training sessions for people on the code. And now we're starting to do that with HAFS. Okay, we've had one HAFS training session already. So now we got a pool of people who understand HAFS. And so now they could be potential partners. What we've got to do is we got to do these training sessions to seed right now the collaborators we want to run on the next supplemental, because they have to understand what it's going to take. Oh, I'm getting $200,000. Okay, great. I'll get a grad student. Well, what is that grad student going to do? And so these are the dependencies. It's the gray matter as well as the dollars and the HPC resource or whatever it is you need, whether it be an airplane data set or a model data set.
It's been
Yeah.
below that time, but I did want to give Dev a chance to ask his question. His hand's been up for a long time.
Okay.
Dev, go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much, and always a pleasure to hear from Frank. This is Dev Niogi at University of Texas at Austin. Frank, I wanted to bring the conversation to the strategy you have for creating the priorities for the supplemental. Are they being handed over by LA, or is it being provided by the scientific community? And I specifically ask in the context of you mentioned land surface modeling towards the end of your presentation or the comment, almost as a follow-up to the hurricane work. And you and I have had conversations how this should be part of the hurricane forecasting process. So when we are trying to prioritize certain physics, or if you're trying to do some work on development of some local digital twins, how do we bring this into the context of the supplemental priority?
Okay, so my experience with that is you have to map what you're going to do onto what the need is. Okay, I would predict that if there is a supplemental, and I have no knowledge other than that we had a major disaster from Helene, and we've had a number of landfalls, Milton, Francine, Debbie, that there will be something in there about tropical cyclones and improving forecasts. I would predict that one of those issues will be hydrology, rainfall in mountainous terrain, in very far away from landfall. And that's always been a problem. I worked on it at Mitch, Hispaniola with Puerto Rico with George. It's an issue, particularly in high terrain. And so I will predict something's going to be there. Now, does HAFS have the capability of supporting that? Does what we're doing in HFIP have the ability to support that? If there's a gap, that's where we want to find out where that gap is and who can address it. And that should be a collaboration. And then we have to figure out, what do you need to be a collaborator?
And I do want to add that with these types of hazards that are extremely far from landfall and far from our normal tropical concerned areas, if there are supplementals that address those, at least some of that will more than likely go to WPC as kind of an extension on the Grand Precipitation Challenge type of research. So it doesn't necessarily mean the hurricane community would be doing it, but we should be plugged into that. And that is something that when they ask for areas that we're interested in or that would fit our mission, it's in the verbiage that we give them on what we would like to see. Whether that makes it into the final kind of marching orders of a supplemental is very dependent on how it's written and how much money there is to be distributed around.
Now you know why I was trying to save extra time for discussion, because we could go for a while, but we're into the break time and some of us have to check out of the hotel. So just please, and not just because I was one of them, but a round of applause for our speakers again this morning. Thank you.
Since we do have people that do need to check out and come back, I'm going to make it a 20-minute break. So we're running at a 10-minute delay. So our next session will start at 10:40. Thank you.